Hello and welcome. If you're new here, my name is Thea Touchton. I am an actor and producer. I make a lot of mental health documentaries and comedic shorts and sometimes a little romances. But if you're at this video, this is actually a film review. And I do film reviews a little differently around here. I don't use any of the shots from the movie. I take shots inspired by my own life just to reflect that every review of film is a profoundly personal experience. So I will take shots of my own life and I will either leave them as is, color correct them, or AI art to get them to fit kind of the theme of the movie. Very fun process. These videos take forever. So if you are interested in supporting, please consider subscribing. You can be a YouTube member of mine and pay a little extra and get some things that are not available to the wide public. You can join my Patreon. You can join my Ko-fi. You can just donate directly to my PayPal. All those links are down below. And I appreciate you so much. So let's get into what is a divisive movie of its time. It is Don't Worry, Darling. Yeah, directed by Olivia Wilde. We love a female director. And the screenplay is by Katie Silberman. I honestly, controversial, I know. I loved Don't Worry, Darling, and I respected it. It is probably in my top 100 films. It does not make the top 10. It probably doesn't make the top 50, but I think it's in the top 100. And it is, I really liked it. I think a lot of people had a bigger expectation after Booksmart. I would say I liked this more than Booksmart. And I love a Florence Pugh. She just steals every time. But there was a lot of controversy because originally Harry Styles' part was supposed to be Shia LaBeouf. And I think it makes sense that as Shia LaBeouf was publicly having a mental breakdown in many ways and just dealing with a lot of dark childhood stuff, was probably kicked off of this. And I honestly can see him in this part, but I don't know if it would have been better or worse. Maybe a little bit better, as Harry's not as experienced. But anyway, I still liked it, you guys. I still liked it. But there was a lot of controversy, too, because they thought that there was conflicts between Pugh and Wilde. But from the research I did, that seems like it was kind of blown up. I'm assuming that Pugh was a little, frustrated because the rumors were true that of them, Olivia Wilde and Harry Styles were dating at the time. They're no longer dating. Also, Wilde was going through a brutal divorce from Jason Sudeikis, yes, of Ted Lasso, that I think is so buried because we have to love Ted Lasso, and I've been honestly putting off watching Ted Lasso. I know I will eventually watch it, guys. I know I'm so behind the times, but I have literally put it off because I think I'm siding with Wilde, y'all. Isn't that wild? But yeah, so they were going through a brutal divorce, right? Harry is the rebound at this point. And Olivia Wilde is pretty older than Harry, and they were definitely boinking like bunnies on the set. And I could understand Pugh understanding that Olivia Wilde is this divorce process, but what a waste of studio dollars to go and do that, and really weird attention. So I can understand her being I respect Olivia Wilde, but this was a little not so, honey. This was a little, off kilter. Did we have to do this, Going back to the Shia LaBeouf rumors, I do want to address that Shiloh did leak this video recording of Olivia Wilde being oh, Miss Pugh, Miss Flo, needs to kind of be put in her place, which was weird to say, right? And not very feminist, which I think is the whole theme of my review. I would say is that this movie is white feminism. Let's just be real. Early core, but not necessarily unimportant. And I think that this movie addresses the hard walk of being feminist in a patriarchal society, and the brainwashing that can do, and the lulls and lures of the patriarchy, as well as the promises and calls of feminism. So Anyway, Shiloh leaked that video where Wilde was begging him back, and you can say she's a bad person. Obviously, she's not like saint of the year or anything. What woman is in this modern age? But I would say, from the perspective of someone who has produced films, there is groveling that you would not normally do. Like you can't always really have like the best moral code in film. Like you can try, but there are some times where I think even with Shyla being like traumatized and not having even the best relation with Florence, is like it is trying to give him like, I want you this opportunity to work through your trauma. Like you made mistakes, I made mistakes. Like let's try to end it as friends. But it is weird for Olivia not to address or explain that. I guess it's also hard because it's like no matter what as a woman, if that leaks at all and she agrees to it, she's demonized and was already demonized. And there are directors that run way more terrible sets. And I think even if she did fuck Harry Styles, which I 100% believe on set, I think that there are directors who have been doing worse. And it's just like a bias of saying that her film sets were terrible. But I think part of that is also done probably that like Shai was starting rumors himself. I think that, I don't think Hughes was happy with Shia LaBeouf and probably felt more comfortable with Harry, but I still think felt very uncomfortable because it is also a very uncomfortable role, and as an actor, like, you're just supposed to be in it, and sometimes you are just meant to feel uncomfortable as an actor, and that just is what it is. I don't think that she was mistreated necessarily on the set, especially if they're saying that they got Shia LaBeouf off for her. I do think it's weird to also make her a scapegoat and just be like, as you can tell, like, Shia LaBeouf has problems, right? And just, like, he needed to work on himself, Like, we could have just left it at there. Anyway, now that we've got the behind-the-scenes drama out of the way, let's talk about the movie itself. So don't worry, darling. It starts with this one scene of Pugh balancing this drink on her head, which I am very impressed because mine's too uneven. But this is also giving me very much My Fair Lady vibes, which is very much like an inspiration, I would say, for this, of like this man taking a woman and making her seemingly greater than she already was, but maybe she was also fine before. So we've got like this one man talking about how our Olivia Wilde's character talking about how like Margaret is this wife that's out of her mind. They're all smoking. It's very much the like romanticization of that like 1950s, 1960s decade. You have another pregnant woman who needs another drink, and they're just kind of stressing, gossiping, very much like, I guess girlies do in a group. I'm not a part of a lot of girly groups, and I feel like we don't often gossip about other people, but I feel like that is something that happens. I'm just not part of that. Also, Kate Berlant is in here as Peg, who's constantly the pregnant one, and I love Kate Berlant. I just wanted to say that. And I also think that given the ending and the fact that maybe the children aren't real in this, I'm like, is she pregnant in real life? Like, this guy is just knocking her up and then he's like raising the babies in real life. Like, I have a lot of questions about her character, but we'll get into that in a minute. First, let's go to the Florence Pugh and Styles doing dust circles in the car. That makes me so nervous. And I would say there's been a lot of critiques about Harry Styles' acting. Is he Nathan Fielder, right? Is he Tom Holland? No. Like, is he necessarily like an amazing leading man? No, he's like fine. I was expecting really bare minimum because I was like, what acting has Harry Styles done? And obviously he was in stuff before this, but I decided that it was fun at this point in the movie. I think I change as we get to know his kind of character, and there is kind of like his character is faltering in the simulation, which is odd. Like, his accent isn't actually like a real accent, and he like made it, which I always thought, I was like, this feels weird. And it doesn't start that way because I think we are fully in the illusion at the beginning of the film with Pugh, and as Pugh undoes, so do like the mistakes of the film also become. Maybe I'm giving her more credit, but that is how I saw it. Another hint of what is to come is that everything is relatively modern-esque, even in the decade. I felt like at least Florence was. Just in the way that they spoke, kind of the way that they moved. There wasn't exactly like the way that the decade moved. And we've got a lot of similarities of everybody. It's like kind of very similar houses, everyone's cars at the same time, all of this like normalcy of like this group hive mind. So Pugh begs Styles not to go. He's like, please just tell them that you're sick. And he's like, well, if I am sick, the only way to cure me would be your kiss. Like they're very much in love. And that's beautiful. Good for them. I mean, the horror of it makes every bit of this that like seems sexualized and beautiful like awful. And I know that was a lot of like controversy. Like one of my good friends, Veronica, she was always talking about how like the trailer is basically glorifying like SA rape and all of that, given like the context of the movie. But we'll get to it. Julie Andrews is on the radio, right? Can't be so bad. But I think that is the moment is like when you are in the middle of an abusive relationship, there are good moments. Like you can be, I know this is gonna sound awful. I feel like you can be SA'd and raped and enjoy it and not even realizing that you didn't have your power or anything, because you get caught up in the delusion. It's like Stockholm syndrome. You get so trapped that you learn to like make the best out of it. Like human minds are made for survival. So you don't just sit there always hating every moment of it. You would, end up unaliving yourself and doing that. You make excuses to make it okay. Like that is just like the way that the mind works. And that's why I think surviving from SA and all of that, acknowledging that part can be very difficult. So then Florence cleans the house, which I hate. And I also have some questions about. Is she cleaning the house in real life or in the simulation? Does it compute? When she moves, is she really moving, or is she just still lying in bed? Things I was very confused about. They also go do ballet. Kate Berlant's doing it pregnant. Iconic. I don't feel like I can move as a person who is not pregnant, and I can't imagine moving when I was pregnant. I feel like I would be just bedridden, committed to the bed rot. We've got stroking of the stomachs and chin, very sexual, like everything between her and Harry is just very alive and, wild, passionate. You wouldn't think anything is wrong with it unless you knew the end. But then we have this weird moment where, for whatever reason, she crushes the eggs and realizes that there's nothing in them. And it's very unclear as like, was that a glitch in the simulation, or is it because the more negative feeling she feels, the less that the simulation works on her, and thus she can kind of sees its flaws. There are many little bits of the movie that don't quite add up to make their sci-fi narrative make sense, or that I think we as viewers want more explanation for. But it doesn't matter if Harry Styles is eating her out on the dinner table, right? It's like, what? It doesn't matter if your eggs don't have yolks in them, They really, really played into the sex of it, and I think Wilde received a lot of criticism for this. And I mean, it is such a weird line, as she was dating Styles at the time. The laws of entertainment are not the same as almost any other business, and it's kind of insane. And I think we are starting to get some transference, which is good, because you can bring order into this chaos. Another topic that we'll touch on in a minute, but it's the romanticization of that I think really makes a lot of people uncomfortable. But that is what it is like being in an abusive relationship. Often is the sex is the only worthwhile thing. It is the thing that kind of keeps you connected, because the serotonin is so low in every other interaction with an abusive person. Like, you don't have any other joy. So the sexual joy is at like the utmost peak. To be honest, like, when I think of my own abusive relationships, the sex has always been the highlight, and something that sometimes I long for in safer relationships, but it comes with such a price. Like for her, she's waiting for him when he comes home at the door, which is sweet. I think men like that. I think that's why I've survived in a lot of my relationships, is like I work from home, so I'm sometimes working right in the living room, you know? Harry and Florence Pugh did not want any children, and that's probably for the best given the entire circumstances of this story. But it's interesting, they don't really push too much on that. I think also knowing what like Olivia Wilde's character knows, they're singing, but they can't figure out what they're singing. There's definitely a lot of culty vibes, like, straight away. I don't know if the filmmakers were, like, trying to hide it for the cult, but to me, I got it pretty quickly. And then we should also talk about justice for Margaret. So apparently, I remember that Margaret was like, I shot so much more scenes and I'm, like, barely in it, and this is an example of, like, racism in film. And I would say that, like, the whole plot line of Margaret in Don't Worry Darling does to me reek of racism. Like, it's everybody doesn't really believe her word, right? It's like always doubting. She, to my knowledge, is like the only person of color in the neighborhood block. So it is kind of that decades of like, oh, remember this decade that was racist that we've been romanticizing for a while? Like there was 100% that vibe. But Margaret is woke. Apparently, she had a son that killed himself in the simulation. Something happened where I don't even know if the son was real or if they just took it away because Margaret's husband couldn't deal with it. That is very unclear because they cut her part from the movie a long time. Like, I didn't even get that Margaret had a son until, like, looking up the Wikipedia page of this story, right? So justice for Margaret all the way. I think this is the film's biggest flaw, is that it focused on like 70 minutes of Harry Styles dancing and extraneous sex scenes to lose Margaret's narrative, which is more interesting than a lot of the other things that they played around with. But anyway, Margaret is like telling the truth that they shouldn't be here, and everyone's kind of like lauding her behavior away, which is very sad. And I also think kind of a commentary on what is often done when people of color speak out about injustices, and that everybody's like, no, that was like out the past, like don't worry about it, like look over here, you know, like don't, no, what are you doing, like you can't, don't, like you don't want to pay attention to that, like you guys are, what are you doing, you know? And everybody's just saying, you know, like, oh, she just gets distracted by what could be, and that the like cult leader, who is Chris Pine, who I think does an excellent job in this role, and I honestly wish we got to know about him a little bit more. I often argue that the fault of this movie is that it has too much to be a movie. This is supposed to be a series in my mind. It's in the wrong medium format. But if you guys ever want to make it a series, I'm a producer and an actor, and I would love to, you know. But anyway, Chris Pine talks about, you know, like the enemy of progress is chaos, which I agree to an extent. I also think that progress is just managing chaos. Like, chaos is here from day one. But Pine has this kind of personality of like, oh yeah, join the family. But he is very much like the cult elitist speaker. Like, I was at a cult and the speakers dress just like him, present just like him. It's very interesting. Nailed that. And you throw a rock in Los Angeles, you can hit a cult leader, you know? For Chris Pine, he believes that every family on the block has greatness in each one and that they are changing the world. However, there are no gay couples, which is partially the commentary on the incelness, but I would be curious of a gay family in there, because I also am like, I don't know. I know we often think of incels as like hetero, but I'm sure there are potentially gay incels as well, or like people who are bi. Like, I don't know that orientation necessarily has a factor in the incel beliefs. I can't do a lot of research on incels without my skin crawling, so forgive me for that. Anyway, so I think there's a Dr. Collins. I can't remember if that is Chris Pine's character. No, he's Frank. Timothy Simmons is Dr. Collins. So they've got a doctor that comes in and checks on Margaret and all the girlies. It's very unclear, like, is he there in real life checking on them? Like, their medical health, especially if they're sitting in bed for this entire time that they've been in the simulation, I don't understand. Like, that's why I have to believe in the simulation, that they're just moving about the house. It just looks different. It's like having meta glasses on, which is also why I wanted to cover this with the rise of AI. And yeah, like, so I think that is what I've worked out in the film, is that they don't sleep in the bed all the time, because that would be a bit wild. But it's very confusing because how she wakes up at the end, but we'll get to that. So they've built the community with Dr. Collins. Frank thanks him for being a partner, and he thanks all the wives. Like, the community's really there for each other, except for Margaret. Fuck her, like, absolutely. How dare she even question, like, which is the cultiest thing ever. I think if you cannot ask a question, like, then there's something going on here. Like, and obviously there are appropriate times to ask a question, like, unless in the middle of a crisis, you're like, if I don't know this question, I don't think I'll be able to perform the thing in enough time. But there are times where it's like, if it's time sensitive and you're asking questions, right, it's like too much of a thing. But that is not the situation in this cult. They have all the time in the world, seemingly. It's just they don't want to be questioned because their whole authority breaks down, and you'd have to solve some of the issues of the science fiction. So they talk about how, like, men ask for a lot, like, that they ask for strength, to be a shoulder to cry on, indiscretion, have their house cleaned by women, which is a lot. It's a little bit of the commentary on the invisible labor, but it's also kind of hard because it is 100% like glamorized, but that is what the simulation is being. It's like, look at these mundane tasks that in the real world, like present day, suck because there's so many other things you can be doing. But in this time, it is glamorized because that is the only expectation of the thing that you have to do. Also, the costuming is beautiful. The bow in Florence Pugh's hair, iconic. I want. My hair is not long enough, and it would never stay so fine. But maybe with the costumer's help, So they're like hiding in Margaret's house's thing with her husband, and she's like, it's not fine. Like, Pugh is definitely like getting a vibe, because I also think that that's like just the beautifulness of sisterhood, is that you're just connected to each other. So when something's off, I think you can feel it if you're really like tuned in and not like too much gone into the illusion, right? So Margaret, I think, hasn't really been sleeping. Florence has also, I think, been having a little trouble. And Margaret has, like, been doing something with dice and having bad dreams. But Harry comes in and does this, like, kind of teasing kiss, which it is very hot. And it shouldn't be in the context. And there is people outside, but they're fucking anyway, because it's their own little world. They can do whatever. And then you've got creepy Frank guy watching, and I don't know if, like, does Harry Styles' character get a discount if the leader of the program is watching? Is that why it's, like, cheap and affordable? I have so many questions. Like, when he leaves for work, going into the real world, is he working for Frank in the real world doing tech stuff, or is it just in the simulation? Like, many things are unanswered. I might actually, maybe I'll move this to 200 and not top 100, but we'll see. I liked a lot of the Survivor story in it, so it's probably, like, low, like, might be in, like, the 90 percentile, and could get bumped as the new movies come in. Maybe I'll have to put Saltburn in, because I kind of feel like I had the same kind of feelings of Saltburn as I did for this movie. So and Frank is kind of in charge of things everywhere, and the women are not allowed to learn how to drive because suppression, right? We have to, but Jack is kind of teaching Florence how to drive, and there's like a bit of like foreplay in this kind of Henry Higgins weird sexual context. So then everybody's upset because Ted got fired. Ted is Margaret's husband, and they all just like feel bad for her, and they kind of reflect on like how Florence Pugh's character and a bunch of them were like their friends back when Margaret was normal, but they think that like she lost her mind and that she had taken her son into the desert, which maybe part of the reason she lost her mind is, I guess, in this simulation the children aren't real, so she maybe took her son out of the simulation thinking he was real, and he either wasn't or he got killed. It's very unclear. Like I said, justice for Margaret. And you have I think it's Kate Berland's character who's like, I would kill myself if Peter ever got fired, and they never found her son. So maybe her son did escape. Like maybe he was fine in the simulation. But it's a bit weird to be like, I'm going to go into this sexual simulation with my father. Like here again is where the lore of the movie doesn't make sense, which is like taking it, you know, putting it in my 90th percentile of favorite movies, you know, like just, I like the concept of a woman surviving an abuse story, but the fiction of it all is a little baffling. So they think that, well, there's like a rumor of that maybe they took Margaret's son to punish her, and Pugh is like starting to hear these loud noises. They talk about like how they believe that their husbands are like working in the development of progressive materials, which I guess in an incel way is factual, not fully a lie, and that there's weapons underground, and there's these like messed up nightmare people, but she's been held closely in her sleep, so it can't be so bad, right? It's holding people close, holding women close, that solves every nightmare. All you need is a hug, right? I mean, hugs help. There's scientific proof, but it is what it is. Anyway, there's this like metaphor of like that they're giving up a smaller version of themselves, and they sacrifice and they do all this pain and effort, and then Pugh is just on the little train. It's a bit curious that there's a train. I don't know really where she's going. If it's her own curiosity about Margaret, what the whole story is there, but she sees an airplane with smoke and crash, and I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea what the lore of that is. Is it just like a technical malfunction? Is the more that Florence's character questions the reality, the more that it seems to crumble? Is there an airplane outside which causes her to glitch in the simulation and dream it? Are they just like testing with airplanes to see, could we have airplanes in this world and like take these ladies to like exotic trips and not just be in the house all the time because they're gonna get bored? I don't know what that is, but anyway, she tries to drive out there, but the train doesn't go that way, so she just gets off, even though there's hazardous materials ahead. Doesn't stop her. She is one tough cookie. She's gonna walk so far with no water. I'm super worried about her at this point when I was first watching the movie. And there's like a soundtrack with her at the dome, and it is cool when it goes red, and there's these like bloody eyeballs and these women with all their beautiful gorgeous legs, and you know, she's just craving order in this senseless world. We all are. There's this like dancing synchronized Marilyn Monroe like, and then she ends up waking up sleeping, and what is real, you know? Things I ask myself every day when I wake from sleeping. So I think maybe she just got exhausted. You know, she's making dinner that has 3 courses. They're making a few changes to the roast. I don't know if there's gaslighting. They're trying to make her think that like what she saw was a dream, like from the airplane crash to everything. But they eat the carrot so cute together, even though they didn't boil the potatoes. And she loves him most, so it's fine. It's all fine, this horrible situation. she feels very squished by the window in the wall. Now her world is becoming too small after seeing the big things, even in the nightmare. You know, funny how it works that way. You got the end of the world song playing, kind of telling. Margaret calls and is like, hey, you saw it, you know, they're lying to all of us. And she's like, no one asked questions. And she's like, we shouldn't stay. I'm not crazy. And it's so sad. The dance that happens is really cool, but they break out of the dance and she sees Margaret there, and she like touches the glass, but then Margaret starts banging her head on the mirror, and there's breaking glass and bleeding, and there's just a bunch of shattered things, and she screams. Everyone is disturbed, but then you turn back and it's normal, and it sucks. I hate just the disintegration of reality for women, you know? It's very nice to be based in the real world, but I get why we lose your mind, because America Fiera's monologue from Barbie be inserted here, right? Like, it's just impossible to be a woman. That's why I'm non-binary. You know, she's Margaret on a roof, which I don't think the fall would kill her, but then there's a knife, and that will. So she slices her throat and drops, and she just says, don't, and a red suit men take her away, as they do. You know, when somebody dies, men in red suits, maybe. I don't know what kind of suits an EMT person wears, but sure, in this world it's red. And then they gaslight her, and then this is where Harry starts to not become amazing, and I don't know if it's because the simulation is wearing off. I would say the direction in that was unclear to me. Probably when you're, you know, kind of having sex with your star lead, you might miss a few things direction-wise, you know, you're just a little busy with stuff. And they are just saying that Margaret slipped and there was only a few stitches, and Florence just has a mental breakdown because she's like, oh my God, she was my friend and she came for me to help and I ignored her, and all this that happened just feels like my fault. And it's honestly very powerful for her to admit it, because she could so easily just believe the gaslighting and be like, no, okay, yeah, that sounds easy because I can be faultless, haha. But she's like, the woman's intuition, it knows. So she's like, no, Margaret, you know, she came after, she knew that we knew something, and like, why are you lying? What are you guys hiding? Something is off. But Harry's like, just can't discuss, you know? And that if she keeps talking about these matters, he's not going to get opportunity and they're going to lose the life because you can't question everything. Because I guess that it would probably wake other girls out of their fantasy, maybe. And she is not even allowed to question because his like job is super at stake, like it's supposed to be like super government or whatever, but she feels like she's drowning, and she ends up just putting cellophane all around her, which I think is supposed to just be a metaphor for like her feeling so absolutely fragile, but it is horrifying to me. But she gets it open one last minute, and they're just like, okay, she's just, you know, having exhaustion and shock about Margaret's, you know, falling. And Florence is like, I saw her slit her throat. I witnessed this trauma. And they're like, no, you're just having, you're fine. But really, she's just having distorted memories, having nightmares. They're pilling her up, you know, can't be on that truth. That makes everybody nervous. Can't have that. And the doctor is just like, don't worry, these pills, they're just precautionary. You know, a lot of patients have success on them. They're just supposed to keep you relaxed. And you know, if you didn't need it, you'd be able to handle yourself. Haha, silly little lady. And he won't talk about Margaret, but they keep a file on her, and they won't discuss Margaret's treatment. And they're not going to tell anything about how they fixed up Margaret. They're not going to spare any details. The doctor is also both psychiatric and physical, which is, you know, red flags, because normally both are specialized in that. And they're saying that physically, Florence Pugh is fine, and psychologically, there just is an outburst with paranoia, and that it was just impossible with, like, Ted and Margaret, and they're saying, you know, like, Ted himself couldn't do the job and can't work for the project, and the doctor's just like, let's just keep calm and carry on, as the Brits say, but he stupidly leaves his briefcase, which is, given that there's not that many women in the village, it is kind of just like, okay, dude, like, I don't know why you're doing that, unless, like, there is a part of you that, like, is like, maybe I should help her, like, there's that, like, wounded bird thing, is like, I'm gonna pretend I didn't break protocol, but I am. The doctor was, like, a hard thing to read. Like I said, there's some direction choices that I think could make us more aware of characters' motivations instead of just kind of keeping us in this fog. But I think they want us to feel as disoriented as Florence feels. But she quickly does, like, goes back to get his briefcase because he remembers, obviously, probably when he's sitting down, he's like, oh, shoot. So she's rushing, the door is ajar, and, you know, she just jokes, she's like, oh, I'd forget my head if it wasn't screwed on, haha, I'm so stupid. But she steals this file, but it doesn't really matter because it's all redacted, as discretion is a privilege. So then she burns the file. Then we've got this, like, zombie makeup face, and they go back to kind of these memories. Like, as she gets more and more aware of what's going on, she's having memories of her own life. And so Harry is then talking about, like, oh, let's have, you know, a baby, because maybe that's, like, why you're so acting out, little woman, you know, like, that's why you're suffering right now. We could just have more of you, you know, a little you. And she's just, like, shocked, right? Because she's like, I just witnessed my friend commit suicide. I don't really want to bring a child into this world because I'm very deeply confused by it. But Harry's like, it'll be fun, you know? Who cares about your confusing little life? You're gonna be fine. And so then we get to, I think, like, one of the most memorable scenes, which is this, like, roaring party brass band where all the boys are drinking. There's Dita Von Teese. She's doing her champagne thing, which is my dream, honestly. I want to see Dita Von Teese live. Florence is not in a party mood. She's, you know, obviously convinced that she saw Margaret die. Her makeup is feeling blurry. Her friend is just blowing smoke. She saw Margaret's fall. She just wants to go home. She doesn't feel like celebrating. And all the boys are like, you know, today's victory, tomorrow the world, which is scary, thinking, like, what, are they going to lock up everybody in the simulation because real life sucks? Like, but they're going and working in real life anyway, so I don't know. Like, it's just, like, a fun metagame. Like, is this something Zuckerberg is doing? Like, the rich would know, right? Like, Olivia Wilde is probably, in a well position that she would know. She would know what's going on. Anyway, so they have the presentation. Jack is getting awarded, which is Harry's character, for all his hard work. I'm very confused. Like, did he just, like, pay extra in the real world? Is he really, like, helping this friend in real life? This is why we need a third act of this movie that is not this movie's current third act. I think this movie just is in the wrong format. I think it needs to be in a limited series so that we can build more of the things that I have questions about. Like, I think there's just so much to cover in this world that in a movie it gets buried and leads to a lot of confusion. Poor Florence is begging to go home, but he's supposed to get a presentation in front of all his boyfriends. Harry Styles looks so skinny and small in this scene. It's very interesting. And Pine is going on and on about how, like, few have grown as impressively as Jack, which is also very weird considering that his wife is also, like, kind of flipping out at this time, and you would think that they would be more on edge, given that, like, it's not a big community, you guys. It's maybe, like, 10 girlies. Like, they're incels, right? They're not all over the world yet. And poor Harry looks so sad, I guess probably sensing that his wife is gonna, like, wreck this. And he's like, you know, Jack is just out of the ordinary. We're all in awe of it, and we're gonna invite him to the senior advisory board. I could tell you what that means. I have no idea. These words, it's just made up, right? It's just a simulation. I don't even know. And he's like, you know, you are the man that you say you are, and he just puts a ring on, and it's a gay moment. It's canonically queer to me, and it's a good fit. And Pine just thanks Harry for the loyalty and is like, oh, don't worry, good things are gonna come. And yeah, it's Florence Pugh's freedom. That's the good thing. And then he just takes off his dances, and he takes off his jacket, first, and then he dances, and it goes on way too long. It's a beautiful dance. It's like sloppy gracefulness. And then Florence goes to the bathroom to freak out, and Olivia Wilde's like, yo, what's wrong? And she's like, no, I'm okay. And then she's like, actually, no, hey guys, Margaret was right. And her friend is like, silences her. And she's like, oh my God, stop lying, like that you saw her fall. And I hated her in that moment. I hate a girl that's not for a girl's girl. Sometimes I've fucked up and been that girl, and I hated when I was, like I just hate it. And then just going on about the freedom of society and arbitrary regulations, and Florence is like, nope, I don't want to go out. I don't want to show. Like, I am losing my mind. And her friend freaks out on her because she's like, you went to her headquarters. You broke the one rule. Like, what you're doing is so dangerous. And like, you stole from the doctor. You're behaving like a child. It is the most important night of your husband's life, and you are ruining it. And it's like, I think for her, she's also having a break. Like, she was able to pretend in a reality, and Florence just like made it break for a second, like outed her world, and she is just mad, like, because it's like then that breaks her reality, and she can't pretend. She has to face the consequences of like that this isn't real, that she is contained to this because she is aware of what is being done to her. So they're on this whole operation track thing. They're trying to figure out, like, it's a whole thing. And Florence is just trying to figure out, like, her sense of self because it's now shattered, because it is shattered. It is this weird paradigm thing. And old Frankie Chris Pine comes to the house. Her friend is not coming. And she is trying to, like, get the other wife, to have another martini glass. And she's like, Jack had this just incredible night, it sounds better, and there's a new guy moving in. There are appetizers and skills that can be taught, and they're just learning exciting things and trying new things, and there's a lot of little boy energy, you know what I mean? Just like men in a refusal to grow up, which is kind of weird because it's like this whole simulation is like playing at being grown up. And Pine has this moment where he kind of just tempts her and is like, oh, I'm so sorry my wife Bunny did, like, I'm sorry that your friend didn't believe you, I'm sorry no one believes you, and they didn't believe Margaret, and why would anyone believe you? And it's so nasty, and it really is what I feel like abusers do when they know that you break your reality. Like, they taunt you of, they're like, oh, I know that you know that I'm lying, and that's so cute, and no one is ever going to believe you because of I benefit from the patriarchal system and you don't. And that is very, very real, and that is one of the reasons I like this movie, is because of the scene. Because to me, I was like, my childhood, thank you for the representation. It's nice to know it doesn't exist just in my head, it is real. And yeah, Chris Pine's character is just fascinated. She's like, oh, I was just waiting for someone like you to challenge me, because they just get off on it, you know what I mean? And she's like, he just keeps going on, like, he's like, oh, no great man can be change and bring change without being pushed. And he's like, you pushed me, and I just hope you keep going. And it's so nasty. It's so nasty and delicious. And Chris Pine kills, and this is when I really started to have respect for him as an actor. I think he kills it in Into the Woods, and I'll get into that on my children's podcast, Is This Really for Kids? But he just goes behind her, and she's like preparing dinner, trying to be a good girl. I love when she sits at the head of the table. I'm so for it, queen. And because she wants to look at him. And she's asking Violet, who's new, where she's from. And she says she's from Philadelphia, which is a bit weird. I'm like, I have no idea where they think that they are in this. It's giving California vibes. It was always she shot in California. But they were like, yeah, it was interesting. Like, you could be from Philadelphia, Baltimore, Chicago. And I also wonder, like, how much of their do they get to revamp where they're from? Because I'm like, if the past comes in too much, is that weird? Or do they keep certain things? Like, I have no idea how this mind control works. That's why we need a series, like, breaking everything down. Like, I'm so down to play if we want to make this a series. I think we could make this really good, you guys. But yeah, Chris is excited. He is like, yep, she's gonna crack with all this information. They talk about how, like, they love the beach, but then they're like, other people are saying, like, no, beaches are filthy, like one of the filthiest things in the world. even though they bring up like the Jersey Shore versus Cape Cod, they're saying they honeymooned in Niagara Falls and the Poconos, and it's very weird. It's like, can they even go to a beach here? Like, I have so many questions. I have so many questions that are not answered. And they're like, oh, where did you meet Bill? And you can see things kind of glitch, and they're like, oh, on a train to Boston, and he dropped the ticket, and he picked it up, and that was, and there they were babes to each other. And Florence brings up about how, like, Margaret had met Ted, and it's like that all these stories are very similar. That was how Debbie met her husband, and I don't know if that's like the whisper words that make them insane. Like, I don't know. I don't know if that's like what gets them the simulation. Like I said, not very explained. Also, my notes on this are not very good, and there are not a lot of other notes on this movie. I kind of wonder if anyone saw it and just rated it bad because of all the rumors. I'm very I don't know. We'll see when I post the video if other people saw it. Comment me if you actually watched this movie. Like, I'm really curious. And Florence just figures out, she's like, you know what? They're telling us what they want us to remember. Because if we remember these things, we're forgetting other things that they want us to forget. And Frank is just like, okay, I'm curious, like, where you're going here, you know? And Florence accuses Frank of doing something, and Frank just then accuses her of delusions in front of everybody, right? So this is not a great move. He got her, which is exactly what they do. They push you, and then you act crazy in public, and then they're like, see, I told you she was crazy, because they had already just told all these people that I think that this person is having a breakdown, and then they go make you have a breakdown in front of all these people to prove their point, but they already set you up. Like, you just play into the trap, and because of course you would, because you're a normal person, and they are an insane person, because most breakdowns people can't see. That is the scary thing about mental health, is so much of it is happening in silence due to the stigma, and that's why I make videos like this. But anyway, so he turns the tables, and Bunny is like, you know, I think we all need to go home, and Florence is just not stopping. She's asking about the project. They're then asked, like, well, why did you go out there? You know the rules. You wandered out by yourself. You put all our lives in danger by wandering out. And Florence is like, I don't care. I saw what you're hiding. Are we trapped? And they're just like, they blame it on psychosis. And I am glad that she is trusting that feeling of entrapment, because it's very important to trust that every day that you can. I don't think those feelings come for no reason. I think that they are worth exploring, because I remember so many times where I just tried to ignore mine and thought that I was crazy. So I really appreciate her standing up. Like, I think that is very beautiful, and obviously Florence acts her amazing skills off. Like, she is incredible. And Harry is just, you know, begging her to trust in the home, trust in him in the bedroom, thinking that, like, his dick can distract her, you know, whatever. And Florence still has questions. She's like, where does the food come from? Like, there's all of these anomalies happening, and she is thinking about, like, poisoning the food, and they are all, like, mad that she's insulting and degrading her husband, because that's extraordinary in that, like, it doesn't happen. But Florence is like, no, I'm demanding answers to these questions. And they're like, you made up these questions. They're not even real. Like, it's such a masterclass. Like, cults use this kind of thinking. It's very beautiful. And obviously, whoever wrote this has gone through it. And I'm here for you. You know? But they call her a selfish, spoiled brat. They think that she just has desperation to be exciting, and that she is spitting in the face of an opportunity. And it is heartbreaking that she is trying to destroy what they're trying to build. Even what they're trying to build is highly illegal. So the wives are leaving in the cars. Husbands are pissed. They accuse her of being overserved. And yeah, she played into his hand. You know what I mean? Like, she should have tried to do it alone, but I get the frustration. And Harry's just like, you know what? I was just expecting more from you. She just played it too early. I'm worried for her. At this point, I'm just like, good luck. Like, I'm like, there's no way coming back. Like, Chris Pine was mastermind. I wanted to run for it, honey. I wanted to go into the desert and just you know, take the risk, take the risk. And her and Harry are not so in love now. Obviously, the jig is up, you know, and Harry's just mad. He wishes that like she had never told her friend and not opened it up at the dinner table. She didn't enjoy himself. He believes that she is sabotaging him, and he is just like really trying to save everything. And it's hard because Frank admitted like everything that he was going to do in the kitchen. And Harry is just like, you know what? Frank wouldn't have done any of that. You're acting crazy. And Florence being so sure that she's not crazy is very powerful, because I guess like for me, I'm always like, oh yeah, maybe I am, because I've dealt with mental illness my whole life. So I'm always like, oh, that's a possibility. And I've had that used against me so many times, and it's been super hard. So it was very powerful to see like a different interaction, because I haven't really seen that before. And Harry goes into the speech where he's like, you know what, to me, you're bigger than all of this. You're bigger than a victory. You're bigger than Frank. Like, I believe in you. I really believe in you. But I'm like, listen, I don't believe in him. I don't trust him. And I don't trust this place. And Florence is the same way. She doesn't want to be here anymore. She wants to leave. And she's like, why can't we just go anywhere? It's like, we could go anywhere in the entire world. It could just be you and me. And we all know heartbreak's coming, because it's not going to be that way, right? Because this is weird. It's a simulation, and it can't, you know? And Harry's just trying to be like, it's not about where we go, it's just that we should be together. And it's like, yeah, sometimes I think as a couple you do need to go to different places. But Harry agrees finally, but I don't trust him. And he kisses her, and he's like, don't worry, we're going to go tonight. They do have great chemistry, given everything, but I know something's going to happen. And she is packing a snack. He's hesitating. And then he just keeps saying he's sorry that he loves her so much, and he tried to keep her from happening. And then these red people take her, and it is exactly like calling a 5150, and it is so messed up. I really never believe in calling 5150s unless you are absolutely sure somebody needs it. I think it's just so much better if you just drive to the hospital, because the other way is just, it's so awful. This is really, really messed up. He sobs. They're restraining her. They're electroshocking her. We see this song that he sang to her. And we getting these memories of like incel Harry, where he didn't have a job. Florence is taking extra shifts. She is not really being taken care of. She doesn't really know how to take care of Harry. Harry doesn't really know how to take care of her. She's acting like it's not a problem. She is a doctor, surgeon, like a baller, right? Which I guess makes him feel insecure. She's making money. I don't feel like any surgeon would ever be in a relationship, but maybe there's some childhood trauma that she's recreating, trying to solve with a partner, because all the girlies be doing that once in their life, right? He's starving because he hasn't eaten, because she works long hours, and I'm assuming he wants to be served, the life that he's created for her in the simulation. He looks super ugly on the computer. There's definitely like, we're unsure of his intentions the whole time, like, because he is just incelly, absorbed into the tech world. There's no phone. That didn't really make sense to me either. I'm also very confused. I'm like, nobody wonders where Florence is. Nobody asks, like, I haven't seen my daughter. Is she like, does she have no family? Like, there are so many questions. Like I said, it needs to be a series. And in their like real life, you know, they have hot water not working. It's just, you know, the real life BS that nobody wants to deal with, that can be frustrating. I think building this whole world that she's not consenting to is wild, you know, but all right, you know, it wasn't me, you know. Harry's trying to get her to dance. I don't know if it seems like at this point in the memory, he's probably in cahoots with Frank already, like figuring it out, but unclear, right? There needs to be more. But she worked a 30-hour shift. She was doing 12 people in 6 hours. And Harry's just like, do you know anybody like truly happy in life? And he's like listening to, I think, Frank on the computer, who is going on about modern society and how it's smothered the true self and keeping a lot of women from their biological destiny. And, you know, Florence is thinking about, like, is he as real as the man that he say he is? Because as we see, like, Harry in real life is American and he's pretending to be this British guy, and it's like, I don't know if maybe Florence had said that was what she had wanted. Like, it's very, very unclear, because we need a little bit more of that. We could have cut back on the dancing and maybe had a little more of the present day life interchanging, which if this was a series, there would be time for that. Anyway, her friend Bunny hugs her and is like happy when she's back. They're going to go play golf. They're going to go to the garden. They're going to look at plants and drink. But she flinches when her lip is touched. Harry's not okay. Peg is always pregnant, which must be maybe something she wanted, or like either the kink that her husband is. Florence's head is all blurry with the treatment, and they're like, don't worry, it'll come back. They see, you know, Olivia Wilde's 2 kids, hugs them, and, you know, they're showing off the signs. They're like, a professional artist made it themselves. You know, look at all this beauty, control, grace, the symmetry. We're moving as one. They talk about old Jack Chambers' blood type, that he's 29, he's O negative, he's fair psychologically, he's British. But they also are talking about that there are consequences to indiscretions, and they give him the kind of this like challenging job to prepare this home device, which I'm sure is just meant to try to see if they can control Florence's like acting out, because I'm sure they learned things from like Margaret that they didn't monitor that they want to, because clearly this is like a new experiment. And you know, they just want Florence to be constant and responsible, keep the physical upkeep. But then we're seeing that her eyes are kind of opening with the tech, that there are these laser goggles, which freak me out to this day, and is something that I always remember from the movie. If you've seen it, you know, it is terrifying to a person with eye problems. It's just awful. And I think there are 72 users in total that are all like holding this together, which is scary, because I don't think their neighborhood has that many people. So that means there are like different divisions, which are very wild. And she's just in the bedroom. And I don't, like I said, I have many questions of like, how is she getting food? How is she surviving if she's just sitting in the bedroom? And she's just singing deeper, and Harry is just trying to say, you know, things are the way that they're supposed to be, trying to do this hypnosis, but, you know, they're like, oh crap, she's having another episode, and just like, this whole thing is horrifying, right? And Harry is just like, what are you doing? Like, what is happening? And Florence is like, what did you do? And he's like, you know, she's like, I don't think that you love me. He's like, I don't think that you love me. And she's like, you're not thinking about life and what you actually like. And he's just absolutely psychotic. And he's like, you know, I didn't take your life. I saved it. He was like, we worked all the time. And she was like, I loved my work. And he's like, no, you were miserable. And she's like, well, you know what? You don't get to take that away from me. And he's like, I didn't take anything away. I gave you all of this. We are lucky to be here. He's like, every day I have to leave here every day to make money to keep us here, and you get to stay here and be happy. And there's a part of me that's like, it's hard, because it's like, he does make sense. Like that is like the hardest thing in this movie, and part of the reason I want it, because it is this like struggle of like, what if you could go back into past times and like women could have more of a choice, because I think there are a lot of women who don't want to work, and I think there's so much shame in that, but you shouldn't have to be a career woman if you don't want to be, like, and it's not your fault. It's not the people who wanted to be's fault. It's not the people who want to stay at home fault that, like, capitalism took advantage of, like, oh, if two families are working, we can charge everything more. Like, that's nobody's fault but the systems. But Harry just argues that, like, it is perfect in here. It's an augmented reality. And Florence is just like, you know what? I don't want life to be perfect. You made me feel like I was crazy. I came to you and you made me feel like I was crazy. You didn't have to lie. And, and Harry's just like, I love you. Like, just whatever abuser does, like, just whatever. And she's just like, okay, well, I don't want to be in here. You said, it's not about where we are as long as we're together. It's like, you said that to me. But then she starts singing. She's like, are there others? Like, what about their bodies? And he's like, I don't know. I have no idea where they are, really. Like, he's like, I'm a dummy. Like, I'm assuming he's gonna, like, what are they doing for work? Like, what, like, how long are they here? Like, the concept of time is not explained. And he's like, listen, like, as men, we're just responsible for our own life and nothing else. Must be nice. And she's just like, all these wives are trapped, and then starts freaking out with the kids. And he's like, oh, don't worry. The kids aren't real. I'm just like, great. I myself don't know what is real at this point. And then, of course, she just hits him with a glass. And then, of course, her bestie walks in to find him. And we can kind of see that, like, all the houses are in the shape of this, like, eye, which is, I'm sure, like, kind of this, like, Big Brother nod to. Harry Styles is dead. Jack is his name in this, so he's dead. And her best friend is like, listen, they're going to kill you. Because for whatever reason, if you die in the simulation, you die in real life. That's also not explained. So I'm assuming that they do walk up out of their bed and are holding objects. And she must have held an object that actually, like, killed him. It's very confusing. But they're like, like, they already know that you killed him. It is a real body. You need to exit. You need to leave right now. Like, and she's just like, well, come on, like, come with me. We can do this. And her bestie reveals, she's like, sorry, girlie, I've always known I'm choosing this. My kids are real to me. They're alive and I'm here and I didn't lose them and I get to keep them. And that's heartbreaking for her. I feel for the girlie. At least she had a choice in it. But not all the women know. Anyway, great that we had this chat. I'm rooting for her to go at this point, and everyone is going out, and Bunny is trying to get everybody back inside. There's literal blood all over her white dress, and she just takes the car. Things are exploding because I guess, like, the simulation is cracking in what she has done, which I'm also like, how does that not alerting other people? Are other people not seeing what she's seeing? Like, are they fucking primarily with her simulation, trying to get her to challenge because Frank, like, just noticed certain things about her and maybe, like, had his fun with Margaret, because that's what abusers do, is, like, they just exhaust people over and over because they don't have the just qualities to know when to stop exhausting people. Like, people are just toys to them. That's just, like, the way that they think. We've got all these cars leaving. She's driving a car. Good thing she knows. I don't know what that was about, too. I wonder if that was, like, Harry was edged to teach her so that little Chris Pine could have his little fun chase. Bunny helped her. She's hitting a guy. We've got all these guys in red coming after her. There's so many cars. A bunch are after her. She almost gets hit by a truck. Soundtrack here is really great. They're bumpering her car. They're reaching out trying to grab her. The doctor is after her. And she's just allowing them all to crash into each other, which is good because I don't like what they are. And I'm just like, girlie, just go. Keep driving. She's trying to find, the way out. Everybody is warned to get, like, a shelter in place. They announce that Jack is dead. Frank's trying to do things, but then Frank's wife stabs him, and that is also very weird, but I'm glad that he is stabbed, Like, I don't really know how, maybe she was not also aware and then also became aware and then just killed him to end this, which is great, but there's literally not enough context in the movie about all that, so that would be nice. And she also says that it's, like, her turn now, so maybe she does know and was just tired of his power and control. I don't know. That's very confusing. We need more. So they're driving home. Her car gets stuck. She's just, like, turns her car, blocks them all. she stops to look at like all these red men climbing after her. I guess we just need the shot at this point because I'm like, I would just keep going straight forward. Like, I can't get distracted by this right now, and I can't get nervous and doubt myself because I would do that in the moment. And she keeps stopping for whatever reason, and we see like this like simulation thing. I don't think it's real because he's already dead, and he's like hugging her and begging her not to leave, and she knows it's a lie. She knows she's not here. She literally waits to the last second, and she's acknowledging that she's going to let go of this reality because at this point it's just chaos, which makes sense to let go of it. I feel like this moment would have come before she was in the car, but like, listen, girlie's going through a lot, so we'll allow it. And then we see all this dance of the women, and I think the movie is deeply unsatisfying to people because we want to see how she adjusted after being in a reality for so, like, we have no idea how long she was in the reality, like, what happens next? And that's why I'm like, this is a series, there's a whole other act, like, if they're coming for her in real life, there's a real life chase, like, we need the third bit of, like, how does she get totally free? Because, yes, she's out of the simulation, but that doesn't necessarily mean she's free. Like, is she in witness now? I guess, like, Frank's dead, and he's the leader, but I'm sure, like, all these other guys know, like, it was there a contingency plan, like a lot of questions. So I could see this movie easily being bumped from my top 100, and maybe it doesn't make it. I would say like I generally like the aesthetic, and I like that it's an abuser story. I like that we are talking about this kind of stuff. I do appreciate Wilde's direction. I appreciated the performances in this film. I think it's pretty good. I think it's a good background movie. I think it was crazy how harsh they were to this movie. And I don't know if that's just females. Like, I mean, Barbie has its own flack, but I think is more beloved, but also kind of took an easier approach. Like, just goes into, like, that it's kind of tough to be a woman, but in shallow aspects-ish. Like, doesn't super... It like, touches on abuse in, like, a lighter way than this movie does. And my Barbie review will be on my children's podcast, so stay tuned for that. Definitely, I think a this season thing, because I think it goes with trauma, and I'm gonna play with that. But yeah, so I don't know. I have mixed feelings with this movie. I think I liked it more so doing this review because as I was saying things aloud, I was kind of like, that doesn't make sense for the movie. So I think if I'm putting it in my 100 list, it's like 98, 99, right? Like, it could easily be bumped as new movies come out, and I watch new and old movies. But what did you guys think about Don't Worry, Darling? I'm wondering if you hated it. Almost everybody I met in real life who saw this movie was just really mad. And it makes sense because a lot of the people in my life are very logical because obviously I'm a fanciful person, so I surround myself with beings that are not as fanciful to ground me, or I would just live in Delululand forever. But I remember like crying and feeling really impacted and just like seeing myself in the abuse and feeling very good about that representation. But let me know how you guys think, and let me know if there's any films that you want me to cover and do, and I appreciate you so much. If you could subscribe, that would help me a lot. And if you know any brand deals or partnerships that would like to come on, I would love to be doing some ads in the middle of this and sponsorships. You could be part of this movie, and that's a little bit cool, isn't it? But yeah, let me know what you thought in the comments. If you have some money to give, consider donating to my PayPal so that, I don't know, maybe I'll make a Don't Worry, Darling series. Like, maybe I'll figure all that out. Well, who knows? If anything, you would at least be supporting a queer musical, a bunch of cool comedic shorts that are going to employ all sorts of diverse artists who are not necessarily getting attention from Hollywood. You're going to help mental health documentaries, so really consider donating, and you get a lot of cool perks. Join my Patreon. All of that stuff helps, and appreciate you guys so much if you made it to the end of this, and very curious to hear your thoughts on this movie, because I'm having really mixed feelings now after this review. Anyway, have a good one. Love you. Bye.